Business Focus with Kudzi Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.
"23 minutes before the news at 8 is our time right here on Capi Talk. Good morning and welcome to Business Focus, where we get to discuss a lot of what's happening in the world of business, as always with Kudzi Sharara. Good morning to you, Kudzi. How are you today?
Good morning, Tinashe. Good morning, everyone.
Great, Kudzi. You are not in the studio today. What are you up to? What's up?
Thank you, Tinashe. So today, there's actually an event where the Minister of Finance and Economic Development and Investment Promotion, Professor Mthuli Ncube, is expected to have a conversation with diplomats and development partners at the Mana Safari Lodge. The Dialogue Forum will serve as a platform to solicit development partners' input in the 2025 national budget and address any matters the partners may wish to bring to the minister. And the minister is also expected to make a presentation addressing the state of the economy. So you see where my interest is. He's going to talk about the state of the economy. So it will be good to hear it from the horse's mouth. Also, he's expected to provide an update on the reforms on development and cooperation architecture, as well as update on the structured dialogue process. Remember that Zimbabwe engaged the African Development Bank President Adesina and also former Mozambican President Joaquim Chissano lead in terms of a structured debt dialogue. So Zimbabwe owes close to approximately 14 billion, and we are in arrears. We haven't been able to pay back our debts, and now we have to negotiate in terms of how we can be able to pay back our debts. Obviously, we can't borrow from the World Bank, we can't borrow from the IMF, we can't borrow from the Paris Club, and because we are in arrears, this dialogue again with the development partners, hope is that they can help us to unlock so that we are able to borrow as a country, to borrow cheaper like any other country. I was looking at a presentation, in fact, at a report done by the World Bank, where they were just listing countries that owe the World Bank a lot of money. Nigeria owes the World Bank alone, not including the IMF and the Paris Club, the World Bank. Egypt is the highest with 14 billion, and then Nigeria, 14 billion, and then Egypt, 12 billion, Ethiopia, 11 billion, Tanzania, 9 billion, and so on and so forth. So these countries are able, even when they default in terms of their debt payment, they're able to restructure, to reschedule, and in some cases, their debts are forgiven. And so this dialogue, I think it is meant to do that for Zimbabwe. So that's where I am this morning. So I headed there straight instead of coming to the studio.
All right, Kudzi, thank you so much for that. Let's look at the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange trading update for Tuesday.
Yeah, the market continues to trade sideways. I think in the last 2 days or so, it was positive, but yesterday it came off by marginal 0.12%. That's on the all-share index. And then the top 10 index also easing by 0.69%. Just looking at that, there were just 3 companies that traded in the negative territory. Maybe it's because of the size of CBZ, for example, that then resulted in the market coming off. So CBZ was the biggest loser with a 10.56% drop. And then Tanganda also coming off by 9.05%. South Africa down by 4.76%. So these were the losers. And Tanganda, since the beginning of the year, it's one of the few companies that are still in the negative territory, even in nominal terms, by 20.6% since the introduction of ZIG. And then on the upside, National Land Holdings was the top riser with a 14.96% gain, followed by Now up by 13.67%, EcoCash putting on 5.88%, EcoNet adding 4.21%, and then First Mutual Property up by 4.17%. That was interesting there. EcoNet, you remember the last time I was telling you that I bought it 350 and then it came down to 303. and then now it's back to 398. Remember, I always say that I love volatility. So if people manage to buy at 303, just recently, I think it's last week, when it was trading at 303, now it's at 398. So that's the beauty of, for me, that's the beauty of volatility. It allows people to come into the market, allows people to exit the market. And Econet is one of those liquid counters every day. Most of the trades that happen on the stock market are in Delta, Econet, and yesterday, most of the funds that were invested went into Econet. About 7.6 million big worth of shares changing hands in Econet. Delta getting about 3.6 million, and Dairy Board, BAT, and Pro Plastics also getting a sizable chunk of the funds that were invested. So that's very. And then just looking at the VFX was positive, up by 0.5%. Then on the back of gains in First Capital Bank, 5.1%, Padenga putting on 1.2%, Simbisa adding 0.03%. Total turnover for the day was one of the biggest that we have seen on the VFX, about $543,000 worth of shares changing hands there, which is up from the previous days, 232,000 that they traded. And then looking at other instruments that are listed on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, the exchange-traded funds, and Co. ETF, as well as the Morgan & Co. multi-sector ETF, added 50% and respectively. And then the Old Mutual ETF dropped 2.28%. And then on the real estate investment trust side, the Kigere rate recovered by 3.49%. So that's how things went on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange as well as on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange.
All right, thank you so much. It's 16 minutes before 8 is our time right here on Business Focus. Feel free to drop in your questions to do with business on our WhatsApp platform 0719 100404. Kudzi Sharara will help us understand more of what's happening in the world of business.
Kudzi, pamuri kuenda unogara naminisa vachataura here kuti what we had predicted with zig rinenge riri pakati neparave rwendo rwacho parakadona, where we went wrong. Will he talk about that?
He might not, but it may be from the audience. We can ask that question. I was also planning, if I get a chance, to ask him to say, for example, civil servants. Remember when the ZIG was devalued, he promised that they will have to review the salaries for government workers. And from people that I have spoken to, I understand that salaries were reviewed. For example, in ZIG terms, someone who was earning about 4,000 ZIG is now earning about 9,000 ZIG. So that's more than 100% increase in the ZIG component. So my question is, how is government going to fund this increase in government salaries? Yes, we understand that the workers, their salaries were supposed to be reviewed, but this money has to come from somewhere. It's not like the devaluation also came with increased revenue for government. So it would be an interesting question to ask, to say, so this is what you have done. Where are you going to get the money?
All right, Kudzi, thank you so much for that. Let's also look at the regional and let's start with the regional markets. How are they performing at the moment?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag in the region. Tinashe, you've got markets in Egypt, Tunisia, Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania, Zambia, Botswana, Mauritius, Malawi. All those markets traded in the positive territory. And then you've got markets in South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe as well, Ivory Coast, Morocco, and Kenya. Also, those ones were trading in the negative territory. Just to go around the continent, just looking at what's happening in the continent in terms of news. So in Nigeria, for example, their inflation in the month of September went up to 32.7%. So inflation is really running in Nigeria, and it's mostly because of due to petrol increases. It seems like they also removed some of the subsidies that they had in terms of petrol. Now that has resulted in the price of petrol going up, and it is also reflected in inflation numbers. And then moving over to Kenya. So Kenya is set to track crypto transactions in real time with new tax systems. So in Kenya, they use a lot of Kenyans. About 4 million people in Kenya use they are crypto users. Cryptocurrency in Kenya. I think it's regulated. You can actually trade in cryptocurrency. They have embraced it. Here in Zimbabwe, we are yet to embrace cryptocurrency. At some point, there were people who were actually facilitating trades in cryptocurrency, but the Reserve Bank, I think, they were told to shut shop by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe at that time. So in Kenya, since they are using it, and the tax collector, which is the Kenya Revenue Authority, is set to introduce new tax systems that will monitor all crypto transactions in real time to maximize and perfect a tax program. So they will be taxing those who are trading in crypto. Kenya is also JP Morgan, which is one of the biggest global banks and well known in the investment circles. JP Morgan Chase, which has approved, Kenya has approved the establishment of their representative office in Nairobi. So again, it's one of the biggest financial institutions domiciled in the United States and operates in 60 countries. So that's another piece of news coming from the continent. And then in Ethiopia, Ethiopia didn't have a stock exchange all along, so they've now established their own stock exchange in Ethiopia, and a company called Ethio, in short Ethiopia, I think, Ethiopia Telecom becomes the first company to list on its newly established stock exchange. So according to authorities there in Ethiopia, Ethio Telecom will become the first company to list on the stock exchange, with government selling a 10% stake in the state-owned telecom provider. And this move marks a major milestone in the Prime Minister Ahmed ambitious strategy to open Ethiopia's economy to private investment and privatize key state-owned enterprises. We've also been talking a lot in Zimbabwe about privatizing some of the state-owned enterprises. We've seen some of them have now been now housed under Tapa Investment Fund. We were hoping that by now the likes of POSB, they had promised before, the likes of POSB should be listed either on the VFX or on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, but it's yet to happen. Hopefully now that there is an executive team at Mutapa Investment Fund, hopefully these are some of the considerations that they are having in terms of privatizing some of the institutions that are owned under Mutapa Investment Fund.
Kudzi, is Mutapa Investment Fund fully operational now, or are you structures?
They are now operational. Recently, they did valuations of all the companies that are under Mutapa Investment Fund, and the valuation said that they were worth $16 billion US. That's the valuation. I don't know. I'm not privy to who did the valuation, whether it was an independent valuation, whether it was a local company that did the valuation, or whether it's an international company that did the valuation. But an asset base of 16 billion is huge. I was actually suggesting maybe they could sell maybe 4 billion worth of assets, or advertise some of those and use the 4 billion to develop our infrastructure here in Zimbabwe, which will also be a key enabler in facilitating growth, not only for their own companies, but for the entire Zimbabwean economy. So it will be interesting. I think we need to have a conversation with the CEO, Dr. John Manguta, or the Chief Operations Officer, Simba Chinyema.
Okay. We've got a question here, Kudzi, from one of our listeners who's saying that aren't all shares on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange undervalued because ZIG parallel rate now plus 40?
Yeah, well, in terms of valuation, there are companies that are probably now undervalued, and there are some that could still be overvalued. So it will have to do the intrinsic valuations calculations. There are several methods that you can do to find out whether companies are undervalued or overvalued. But just from just what can I call it? In my view, I think we have got, just looking at their valuations before the devaluation and then their valuations now. If you compare the two, then you'd say they are now undervalued when you compare to the valuations before the devaluation of ZIG. Yeah, valuation, papa. But I think, yeah. For example, one of the counters that I normally track in terms of its valuations is Econet. And before the devaluation, I think it was valued at around 19 US cents in real terms. But after the devaluation, it came down again to about 10 cents. But I think it's back to around 15 cents again. So you can, using that, you can say some of the companies are now trading below where they were trading before the devaluation of this.
So, Kudzi, volatility, nekuva unpredictable, is it the same thing?
No, it's not the same thing. Almost the same, but I don't think it's the same thing. Unpredictability means that you things can change at any time. But when it comes to volatility, like in the market, you can say it's unpredictable because you know that at some point the market will come off and at some point it will go up. So that's the volatility. But unpredictability, it's like when everyone is thinking that the market is going up and then all of a sudden it starts coming off unexpectedly. So this one, predictability, I think they're slightly different.
All right, Kudzi, let's, as of today, we are bringing back that segment that a lot of people have been asking for on Business Focus. That is our financial term of the day.
Yeah, so financial term for the day, treasury bills. So, financial term of the day is treasury bills. And these are short-term debt instruments or debt securities issued by the government to raise funds. And in Zimbabwe, they are issued by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe on behalf of government. And these bills are generally considered to be relatively safe investment due to the backing of government. And the key characteristics of those treasury bills include they have a short-term maturity, so they can be 30 days up to a year in terms of, so they are highly liquid. They also sometimes pay zero coupon securities, so they do not pay interest rates critically. Instead, they are sold at a discount to their face value and at face value at maturity. And then they are also said to be of low risk because they are government-backed securities and they are generally considered to be relatively safe investment, although their value can fluctuate based on market interest rates. They are also issued regularly, especially in Zimbabwe. The RBZ frequently issues new treasury bills to meet the government's funding needs. Remember, question Mthuli saying he might likely borrow from these treasury bills. So in Zimbabwe, treasury bills are normally bought by financial institutions such as banks, investment firms, as well as pension funds, among others. Unpredictability. It's not a predictable return because investors can typically predict the return on treasury bills at the time of purchase as it is determined by the discount rate. And now Zimbabwe uses treasury bills quite a lot. Remember that we said that during the second quarter of the year, there was a budget deficit of about 1.2 billion ZIG, and government said this 1.2 billion deficit will be financed mainly through treasury bills on the domestic market. What it means is that government is going to be borrowing from the domestic market. And you know, when government comes to borrow from the domestic market, in some cases, it results in crowding out the private sector. So that's a disadvantage of treasury bills. And in total, just during the second quarter again, government made domestic payments on maturity of treasury bills amounting to $259 billion. Dollars. At that time, it was still dollars. It was not yet ZIG. So about 259 billion worth of, and then in ZIG, it also paid about 77.7 million ZIG, and then in US dollar terms, $253.5 million. These are repayments that were done by government after it had borrowed through treasury bills. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Kudzi. There is, we've got about a minute to go. Baba Hunter is asking, what happened to the holders of the Zimbabwe gold treasury bills after the currency devaluation? Is there some loss compensatory mechanism in place for them? Some were holding 2-year instruments.
Yeah, for treasury bills, if there was that devaluation would have affected you. So sometimes then government gets to benefit, and as the minister was even acknowledging it to say some are going to benefit and some are going to make losses. So government, I think, in my view, would have benefited from this, and those bought the treasury bills are in a loss position. And again, when there is high inflation and currency depreciation, those who bought government treasury bills, again, they will be affected in terms of their return.
Okay. All right, Kudzi, thank you so much for Business Focused for today. Maybe you can hold it for tomorrow. Somebody is saying, can I sell treasury bills before maturity? Let's respond to that as our first one for tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Tinashe.
All right, thanks, Kudzi. Good day to you.
Thank you.
Business Focus with Kudzi Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.